This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com, and I just wanted to do a bit of a fan discussion and review of some of what the wrestling world had to say about the passing of none other than Taskmaster Kevin Sullivan, who passed away at the age of 74 today after being in poor health since mid-May and undergoing a terrible health struggle. So I was happy to see that WWE and Triple H paid tribute to him. Triple H, who I know Kevin had a lot of respect for, said Kevin Sullivan had one of the most unique minds in the history of our industry, pushing creative boundaries and developing some of the most intriguing characters to step into the ring. He had unwavering passion for what we do. My thoughts are with his family, friends, and fans. Now, if you've been watching the Taskmaster Talks Kevin Sullivan podcast on this channel with John Paz over the past couple of years, but pretty much since Triple H took over, Kevin had nothing but high praise for him. Of course, Kevin was close friends with Ric Flair, who said Kevin Sullivan has been one of my closest friends in the business. His knowledge of all sports, not just wrestling, is unparalleled. He's one of the most brilliant minds in the history of our business. Kevin led WCW to a 1.5-year victory over WWE and dealt with so many stars. I don't know what the rest of that is, but he was in charge of WCW's booking at various times back when they had the booking committee in the late 80s, as well as during the 83 weeks of dominance. It was mostly Kevin Sullivan booking. As he said, he had a great talent pool to book with, but he definitely kept things interesting during that period of time. Tony Khan from AEW had donated $10,000 to Kevin's GoFundMe, which reached over $50,000, which I'm sure helped him in his last period of time on this earth. So AEW in the wrestling world mourn the passing of the legendary Kevin Sullivan. Our thoughts are with his family, friends, and fans. Taz, who Kevin always spoke highly of, also sent his condolences, as did Karrion Kross, who I've met, and I know Karrion and Kevin stayed in contact and had a close relationship. He even did a video for Karrion Kross not too long ago. DDP also expressed his condolences. And it's interesting. I interviewed Kimberly Page last week, who seemed to indicate that there was some tension between her and women. And I did watch this video of DDP talking about Kevin Sullivan, and that I guess at one point there was some tension with them in WCW too. But they talked towards the end of Kevin Sullivan's time in the hospital, and they had a good conversation. And I know DDP had donated a large amount to Sullivan's GoFundMe as well. DDP, he's done very well for himself, and he always helps take care of the wrestlers that need it. I know Kevin made a lot of money in his career, but things come up and divorces happen, and don't exactly know what happened. I know there was an issue with one of his gyms in the Florida Keys at one point. I think a hurricane devastated it, but he lived in Washington on an island, from what I understand, not too far away from Vancouver. He actually was in Florida when he first went in the hospital, where he was spending a lot of time in recent years as well, and he was later transported to Massachusetts. I remember I first met Kevin back in 2013 when I was assisting Billy Graham who we lost last year. And I know Kevin took that one. Kevin was close with Billy Graham, and of course I was very close with Billy Graham. He was like a grandfather to me. And of course, when I was working with Billy Graham that day, Kevin came over to pay his respects to Billy. And I think I shot a little video with him where Kevin had said that Billy was actually using snakes in the Florida territory before Jake started using snakes. But I remember that was a very nice interaction. Then a couple of years later, David Penzer was doing interviews at WrestleCon. And when he interviewed Kevin, Kevin had mentioned that he had seen some of my matches and he thought that I should be in one of the WrestleMania matches. And I was like just blown away when I heard him say that, because I was shocked that Kevin would even know who I was. And it wasn't too long after that I actually met Kevin for the first time and ended up doing a 3.5 hour shoot interview with him. And I was with him for several days. It was during a convention. Also interviewed J.J. Dillon that weekend, but I got along very well with him. Ended up interviewing him a bunch more times. He was very laid back guy, very nice. Loved to talk about wrestling. And of course, I love talking about wrestling. I'm in the wrestling bubble. He also liked sushi a lot. We've had many sushi dinners over the years. One of the nicest things he ever did to me was when the last major, if you want to call it a major company, even though it was a major company on a more minor level, but it did have, it was on a number of TV stations, was SWE Fury in Texas, which had a lot of steam during the COVID period of time. And Kevin Sullivan was the booker, along with, for some reason, Teddy Long. I don't know why they needed Teddy Long as the booker. I don't think he added anything to it, and he ultimately put the nail in their coffin. But one of the great times I had was when Kevin brought me in to wrestle for that company, where due to the restrictions, I ended up just staying in Texas for a period of time to avoid travel restriction, going back and forth to Canada, quarantine things. And I remember during that period of time, when Kevin would fly in, I would usually pick him up at the airport and we would go somewhere to have sushi. And I remember the nice conversations we would have. He also managed me in LA a couple of times. And I remember how fun it was, just like as a guy from Canada, when you're driving around Los Angeles, seeing places that you only see in the movie, and you have Kevin Sullivan with you. I just remember me being a fan of WCW, how cool that was. And I think the first memories I have of Kevin, of course, I remember seeing him on tapes as part of the Varsity Club. But when the Dungeon of Doom was kind of made for kids, and I really, I guess, became a fan of his during the whole Dungeon of Doom period, because I was young during that time. It was made for kids and I was a kid. So I liked the guys that he had, like Kamala and Paul White when he was the Giant. And at one point Vader was in the Dungeon of Doom. All these creepy characters, and then the Master, and how creepy it was. So I guess I became a fan of it then. I did like those days of WCW. I remember having sleepovers at my grandmother's house, and my parents were not wrestling fans, so they would never let me watch wrestling while having dinner. But my grandmother and I would watch WCW during that period and have pizza. So that was the whole Dungeon of Doom period, and it brings back good memories. I never really had a bad experience with him. He was great at coming up with ideas for booking matches. Anytime I was on a show with him, he always booked the finishes of my matches. If he happened to be on that show, he always had good ideas for me. There was a few ideas that we never ended up being able to do that were planned to have happened, but I won't digress into why that didn't happen, but it's unfortunate. But overall, it was a pleasure working with him. There was a lot of funny moments. Um, I remember having that match with Scorpio in LA where Kevin Sullivan was managing me, that I ended up getting a torn pec and a concussion in. But for some reason, I don't know if it's noticeable on film or not, but he wasn't there when I was announced to come out. And he just kind of appeared at some point within the match. And I just remember thinking how funny that was. It's like, where's Kevin? I guess I'm just gonna go out without him. He was just always a hilarious character. Had good interviews with him. We had good chemistry in interviews. I was always happy to have his podcast on this channel because it documents history and like it definitely documents. And I just noticed, by the way, I'm doing this update with the wrong title on it. Sorry, guys. But it documents history and it documents his opinion on a lot of stuff. So I'm glad we had his podcast air on this channel. I'm glad to have known him. I'm glad that he was there for a mentor to me. He was never as close as me as Billy. Billy and I almost had pretty much love for each other. Billy Graham was my main mentor. I truly felt part of a family. I would say Kevin was more like an uncle. But it was a pleasure knowing him, and I really wish the best for his family, and I'm glad that he doesn't have to suffer anymore. God bless you, Kevin. Thank you for everything